we're a shit team, but we're an underrated shit team. That's about as accurately as I can put it.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily podcast on fantasy basketball. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball podcast, brought to you by Fantrax and Basketball Monster. And today's Locked On Fantasy Basketball podcast is also brought to you by Draft, a daily fantasy app where your chances of winning are almost 3 times better than on FanDuel or DraftKings. Download Draft now or go to playdraft.com and be sure to enter the promo code LOFANTASY for a 100% deposit match bonus up to $600. My name is Josh Lloyd and you can find me on Twitter at redrock_bball. We've got lots to talk about today. As always, I don't know if today's going to be quite as long of a podcast as what we've seen recently, just because we've only got 6 games on Monday and 6 games on Tuesday to look at. But there's still lots of stuff to talk about, as there always is in the NBA. So
let's get to it.
All right, that is a very good idea. Let's talk monstrous line of the night. There was a few guys I could have chosen from for the monstrous line of the night, but I ended up going with DeMarcus Cousins of the Sacramento Kings, and this was the replayed game between the Kings and the Sixers. And from the very first 5 minutes of the game, you could have said, you know what, Boogie's going to be the monstrous line of the night because he was on fire in that first quarter. I think he dropped 16 points in that quarter, ended up with 46 and 15. But he had 5 assists, he had a steal, he had a block, and he also hit 4 3-pointers. He went 20 of 22 from the free throw line, so that is such a massive bonus in that category. And he was 11 of 16 from the field. Now, getting that many free throws and hitting them at that sort of a clip is such a huge boost to begin a week. That is just, look, so some players are getting there 3 times, 4 times to the line. Like Boogie's gotten there 22 times. We're talking 7 times the general average volume of free throw attempts for most players. And then converting them at 91% is huge. Boogie has been, I'd say he's been pretty good this year. He's been the 10th ranked player in 8 category leagues, and that's with him shooting just 46% from the field. Over the last 2 weeks, he's taken that to 48%. Yeah, his percentages are always a worry, but they're definitely not punt worthy. He's just marginally below average in both field goal percentage and free throw percentage. And you can say, okay, he's not getting me 55%. That doesn't bother me because I just build my team around that. And no one else has really given you 28.5 and 10.5 and 2 triples and 4.5 assists and 1.5 steals and 1.5 blocks. He's basically at a triple 1.5 at the moment, and he's getting 28, 28.5, 10.5, 4.5. Like, those numbers are crazy. And any situation where you're punting percentages and Boogie rises up and is a comfortable top, he's already a top 10 player, but he is a comfortable top 10 player and pushing into the top 6 sort of area, because they're the only things that are actually negative about his game, just putting up those other fantastic numbers in those counting stats. So Boogie has had a great season. Don't think the Kings are going to make it into the playoffs, but he is still putting up some very impressive type numbers. And probably the best thing is the free throw percentage in terms of increasing from 72% last year to 78%. That's a big difference, especially when you're taking 10 attempts a game, going from a guy who was a huge negative to being that player who is sort of just not negative, but right on the borderline, I guess, is the best way of phrasing that. Let's talk about today's sponsor, and it is Draft. I already know that you guys love playing fantasy basketball because you're listening to this podcast, but if you want a different way to play daily fantasy sports, Draft is the way to go. You can search Draft up in your app store, whether that's Google Play or the Apple iTunes app store. Search Draft, and it'll be the first option that comes up. Now, how does Draft differ from all the other DFS sites? Well, it's a snake draft. It's the same snake drafts that we do back in September or back in October, but it's for daily fantasy. So you go in there, pick back and forward. It can be a 2-man head-to-head. You take Boogie, I'll take Harden. You take Russ, I'll take LeBron. Whoever it is, whichever order you want to do it. So therefore, your chances of winning, if you're switched on and know what you're doing, they're elevated. They're almost 3 times as high as what it is over on FanDuel and DraftKings, because people can't sell lineups for this sort of a game because you don't know how the draft is going to play out, who's going to take who where. It's not a matter of just fitting players into the salary cap like your other formats. So there's a lot more variability, and it is easier. I'm not sure if easy is the right word, but it is easier for you to win money because, again, you don't have to be going up against these situations where there might be the same lineup entered in there 1,000 times in a 50,000 man tournament or something like that, and going up against people who are considered pros at this sort of a thing. So draft's a great way to go about it. The other good thing about it is, one of the best things about it is you can get a huge deposit bonus on your first deposit. The guys at draft are going to match it 100%, up to $600. So you put $600 in, draft gives you $600 back as well. But the only way to do that is to use our promo code, and that is LO Fantasy. So make sure you go and download this app. Even if, just download it, just see what it's like, and go and enter that promo code, add your money in, get your bonus bets. I'm sure listening to this podcast and being as enraptured in fantasy basketball as what you are, you're going to have immediate success over on draft. So either go to the App Store and search in draft, or go to playdraft.com and then download the app from there. Use that promo code LO Fantasy and get yourself your 100% match deposit bonus and start doing snake drafts in a DFS type setting. Let's talk waiver wire line of the night. Jimmy Johnson is back. Another waiver wire line of the night for Jim. He had 17 points, he had 4 rebounds, he had 5 assists, he had 2 steals, he had 3 blocks, he had 2 triples. He was 6 of 11 from the field, and he was 3 of 4 from the line. I reckon about 2 seasons ago, maybe when I started doing this podcast, I was constantly bothered by the fact that the Raptors refused to play him. And I knew that if he was going to get minutes, he was going to be a fantasy stud. We saw that marginally in his time in Chicago, in his time in Memphis, we saw it, and in his time in Toronto, but he just never played often enough. But now in Miami, he's getting the opportunity, and he's showing us exactly what he can do. His last 2 games have yielded in total 35 points, 2 triples, 12 rebounds, 10 assists, 4 steals, 4 blocks, and 54% from the field shooting. And he's shooting pretty well on his. He's shooting 7 of 8 on his free throws as well. So some fantastic numbers from Jim. Now there was this little stretch where he was struggling. There were a few things wrong with that, or a few reasons for that happening. One was foul trouble that limited him to 19 minutes in the game against Brooklyn. There were 2 games where he shot 1 of 6 and where he shot 3 of 12, which reduced his points output. But that's not what Jim Johnson is about. He can score. We've seen that here. But it's about his ability to get assists, which has come out of nowhere from him this season, to be honest. He's never been a big assist guy. His ability to get steals, his ability to get blocks. He is a perennial Richie Beno threat.
2 for 2.
He can do that all the time. He's not only a Richie Beno threat, he's a guy that could have a 5-5-5, like 5 triples, 5 steals, 5 blocks. And you think that's dumb. It's not. He's had 5 steal, 5 block games in the past before. He's had games this season where he's hit 4 triples in a game. He could easily, he couldn't easily do it, but he could definitely do that. He could definitely be a player that has instead of a 1-1, he has a 5-5. Like that, he could be one of those players. So Jim Johnson needs to be owned. He's a top 50 player over the last month. The only player that would have potentially worried me into terms of cutting off his value was Justice Winslow, but he's not coming back. The other players that play his position are terrible. Derek Williams, Luke Babbitt. Like these players aren't good at all. So I still think that Spoelstra underplays Johnson and doesn't play him enough, but he's still consistently at 30 minutes over the last month, 30 minutes over the last 2 weeks. But he could be, and probably should be, getting 34, 35 minutes and playing this big role because the only player to come back is Joshie Richardson, and that's not going to impact what Jim can do. He is going to come out there and he's going to put up numbers and he needs to be owned. So make sure he is owned in your league. But he is obviously, if he's the waiver wire line of the night, he is sitting on some waiver wire, so that means that you can go and grab him, and that might really help your team. So go check out to see if Jimmy Johnson is available. Let's talk young gun of the night, Karl Anthony Towns of the Minnesota Timberwolves. Josh Bazza, how many young guns has Townsy got? It's got to be pushing double figures, right? Who's leading? Is it him? Is it? It's either him or Miles Turner. Would be my guess. Please let me know, Josh and Barry, who are the official award talliers for this podcast. So let me know where Townsy is sitting in the young gun of the night. I predict he's second behind Miles Turner. Would be my guess. 23, 12, and 7 for Townsy. 3 blocks, 1 triple, 8 of 18 from the field and 6 of 7 from the line. In fact, this game here, he didn't shoot over 40% or over 50% from the field for the first time in his last 7 games, but everything else from him was fantastic. That's another 3 blocks. He added 7 assists, and this is a player who can average 25 and 12, but can do it with 25, 12, and 4, and 2 blocks, and 52 and 82. I believe that he can do that, and he's hitting 1.2 triples per game this year. We're talking about a guy over the last 2 weeks that's averaging a triple one, 30 and 12 with a triple one and 4 assists on 59 and 80. That's the 3rd ranked player over the last 2 weeks, the 5th ranked player over the last month. This is the guy that we envisaged at the start of the season, and he is turning it on in a very, very big way at the moment, and he will be the number 1 player, I believe, in the next 2 to 3 years. I said that probably about 2 months into his season last year, and I firmly believe that by the end of his rookie contract, Karl Anthony Towns will be a number 1 selection in fantasy drafts. Again, he started off a little bit slowly, but I've gone over the reasons for that a million times. I don't need to rehash it again now. Well, if you guys that didn't listen, it was percentages. That was it. He just wasn't shooting. He was shooting 6% worse from the field and about 5% worse from the line. The dud of the night. I suppose it's a bit harsh to give Evan Fournier the dud of the night, because it's a positive that he was back, that he's back on the court. But it wasn't a great night from Fournier. 9 points with 1 rebound, 2 assists, 1 triple, and 4 of 11 from the field. And Fournier was a guy, and he is still a guy, that's going to be a useful player. But he is available on waiver wires. Some, not all. And he is a player that's getting mentioned in the same breath as Dion Waiters. To me, he is extremely undervalued. And I know he's missed some time, and this wasn't a great return. And if you look at his numbers over the last month, he's ranked 277th. It's terrible. He's shooting 36% from there. But what Fournier is a high-efficiency shooting guard, and they don't come along often. But in that last month where he's been dealing with his sore foot, he hasn't been able to shoot well, and that's dropped all his numbers. If he's on your wire, he's an immediate grab. Consider him like a top 75 type of player. That's how you should be viewing Evan Fournier, in my opinion. Look, it might take him a week to get back to playing 33, 34 minutes and getting things going, but he's a player that can average 16, 17 points a game. You get 3 assists, get a steal, get 2 triples, and be a high-efficiency shooter, and get that really good free throw percentage going as well. So have a look if he's around and value him that way. That's what you shouldn't be looking at him as being this guy that's ranked 270th. You should be looking at him as a player who from here on out has got top 75. No, that's not true. I think he should be a top 75 guy. His upside is top 50. I have doubts that he gets there, but that's where his upside actually lies. So if you want to look at what's the best outcome, what's the outcome that could really work the best for me, top 50 is where it is for Evan Fournier. So just bear that in mind and don't think that he's trash, because you probably all know that he's one of my favourite players. Let's talk about these games, all 6 games from Monday, in a little bit of extra detail. The first one of those we're going to take a look at is that rescheduled game between the Sacramento Kings and the Philadelphia 76ers. The Sixers, again, they get the victory. A huge win for them without Joel Embiid again. We'll start with the Kings. We've talked Boog already. Willie Cauley-Stein chimed in with a very good performance. 17 points for Will in 20 minutes, a steal and a block. Let's have a look. How did it come about? Well, it came about on 8 of 10 shooting, which is obviously unrealistic, but he can be a decent finisher. Now, this is a few solid games from Cauley-Stein in a row. He's a long way off becoming a 12-team league guy for me, but I admit he has looked very much better there over this last stretch than what he did for the previous 3 months of the season. He's probably a guy I look at in a 16-teamer or maybe an 18-teamer and go and add him in that sort of a scenario. But he's not a player that I'm really considering as a 12-team guy just at this point. Matty Barnes, 16 points with 4 triples in 22 minutes, hasn't really been able to take advantage of Rudy Gay's absence, but occasionally he'll have these games. Occasionally it'll be Anthony Tolliver. Occasionally it'll be Garrett Temple. So it makes him look. Temple's still the guy to own, but far from him, he's far from being a must-own player. He's a guy that, if you honestly appraise your roster, if he's not your worst player, he's your second worst player. So that doesn't mean that he's a must-own guy. As for Garrett, he had the 35 minutes, 7 points with 5 assists and a steal. He is just, somehow his usage has actually gone backwards with Gay out, which is a staggering number to me, given that Gay took so many shots. They're just not going towards Garrett. Like the Knicks, Knicks center situation, the Kings point guard situation is equally confusing. Darren Collison's been playing 35 minutes, 41 minutes. In this game, he played 24. He had 8 points with 2 assists, and Ty Lawson played 27 and had 4, 3, and 11. Collison is still the guy to own in 12-team leagues, and he still should be owned. But having reliability with him, you can't, because Dave Yeager hasn't, and he will continually chop and change the minutes for these guys. I don't think Lawson is a 12-team league player, but occasionally he'll chime in with a game like this, and that's 2 strong ones in a row for Lawson. I wouldn't be getting overly excited about it, but it's something to monitor, and it's frustrating. We know that. Costa Koufos started one of the weirdest starts of the year. Not this game, but just the fact that Costa Koufos continually starts. It just has been a very weird situation. And Aaron Aflalo had 8 points in 36 minutes. Long live Aaron Aflalo. Let's talk about the Sixers. How's my boy Bob Cove going? Remember the Bob Cove panic? Remember the Bob Cove hatred at the start of the season? How's it looking now? He's a top 20 player over the last 2 weeks. He's a top 70 player for the entire season. Actually, that's not true. He's a top 60 player for the entire season. He shot the ball piss poor at the start of the year. You'll get absolutely no disagreement with me from that. But he was still getting steals and blocks and rebounds and getting shots and getting minutes, and he still needed to be owned. And this is why, because he went 23 and 10. He had 4 triples. He had 2 assists. He had 4 steals. And the shot fell. He is on an absolute red-hot roll at the moment. It goes without saying that he is a must-own player. I really think that you can talk about Joel Embiid being the process. Yeah, Bob Cove is the process to a degree because it's part of what the process is. Let's be bad. Let's offer these contracts to players, non-guaranteed minimum-type deals to multiple D-League fringe players and see what we've got. Bob Cove's a legit rotation player on an 8-seed playoff team. He's a legit rotation guy. He is one of the very best perimeter defenders in the NBA. TJ McConnell is a legit rotation player on probably an 8-seed type team. He's a legit player. He's not a starter for a good team, but he is a legit player that they found through this process of let's just give these undrafted kids a go. Let's give D-League call-ups a go. That is part of what the process was. And Bob Cove has been a huge example of that, and he is on such a brilliant contract. He's been 4 years and $1 million and is going to get paid very handsomely, which I believe is up at the end of this season. Could be next season. I have to check into that. There was no Joel Embiid, so the Sixers went back to Jahlil Okafor, who just hasn't played in so long. 22 minutes for Jahlil, 15 and 4. I don't think that Okafor should be a 12-team league guy at all. Nerlens Noel still played 25 off the bench, went 12 and 3 with 2 assists, 3 steals and a block. 5 of 5 from the field for Nerlens. Good numbers. But that's almost ceiling for him unless he goes to a team and starts. But we've talked about that plenty of times. Source Castillo has had his career revived, 16 points with 4 triples in 28 minutes with a steal and a block, while Dario Saric was fantastic, 17, 5 and 6 in 27 minutes. He has been much improved over the last couple of weeks. He's still not good enough to be a 12-team league player, but he's still improved, while TJ McConnell, the aforementioned McConnell, had 11 assists to go with his 2 steals, and he should be owned in all leagues. The Brooklyn Nets and the surging Miami Heat. For the Nets, there was no Jeremy Lin, of course. There was no Joe Harris. These point guards, they're playing pluckily. 24 minutes for Isaiah Whitehead, 24 minutes for Spencer Dinwiddie. Whitehead had 13, 4 and 5. Dinwiddie had 10, 5 and 2. Good numbers. Solid numbers. Useful numbers. They were doing nothing that was useful whatsoever for a while, but they're looking much better now. And they're not standard league players, but they're like your 16-team leaguers that you can definitely look at until Lin returns. Trevor Booker had one of his best games in a while, 13 and 8 with 2 steals, but he is not really worth owning in most standard formats, same as Bojan Bogdanovic, who had 16. Brookie Lopez struggled, 14 points on 17 shots, which is abysmal, and Karis LeVert was also bad, 4, 6 and 2 with 2 steals for LeVert. The positive sign for LeVert is 27 minutes. The negative sign is he did nothing in 27 minutes. You know, I love LeVert. I just do think that it's going to be hard for him to crack top 120 value this season. Maybe he can get top 120, maybe top 100. But holding him now and just playing it out, I just have a feeling that the Nets just aren't going to push him to 30 minutes at all this year. They've had ample opportunities to push Rondae Hollis-Jefferson into a bigger role, and they haven't done it at all. So they're not prioritizing development in that sense. Yes, LeVert's minutes are creeping up, but I think that at 27, that's probably where he sits. around this zone, and it's not enough to be a 12-team league scenario. So you might be stashing him, but I can almost guarantee, I won't fully guarantee it, but I can almost guarantee that by cutting him and just moving through that spot with players who become available, Yogi Ferrell, if it's a Zubats, who I think's got a better chance to be relevant than what Levert has, I think you'll end up doing better if you move in that direction. But this is taking nothing away from how much I like Levert. And yeah, he could very easily blow into a top 75 guy even next season. I just don't know if it's going to happen this year with the way the Nets are being so cautious, I guess, with his minutes. For the Heat, again, that another victory. That's 8 on the trot for the Heat. Hassan Whiteside, 12-9 with 3 blocks, so his owners will love the 3 blocks, but not a great night otherwise. While Scooter Magruder had 13 points in his 32 minutes. He hit 3 triples and 2 steals. A good night from Magruder, but yeah, he's not impacting leagues outside of 20 teams deep. Goran Dragic had 20 and 8 with 3 steals, while the Dion Waiters machine keeps on going. 36 minutes for Waiters, 19, 6 and 9, a block and 3 triples. He did it on 18 shots, so he wasn't efficient. He was 2 of 4 from the line, so good by percentages. But the counting stats for Waiters are good. They are going down. They will go down. Joshie Richardson will be back. Tyler Johnson was back. Now, Johnson had just 3 points in 19 minutes. He will be better. He is fine for 12 teams. As is Waiters. Waiters is a guy that you probably should own at this point, but just be aware when you're valuing him or viewing him long term is that he's at the peak now. So he's peaking. This is the peak down Waiters. He is going down. Other players like Tyler Johnson, other players like Evan Fournier, they're at the bottom and they're coming up. And within a week, they're going to cross each other. And Waiters is going to come back down to 27 minutes and be shithouse. And these other guys are going to step up. But he's playing fantastically well now. So using Waiters in the spot maybe that you're stashing Levert would obviously be helping you a lot more at the moment. And that's the way you've got to look at these last spots on your roster, at least until we get to playoff time. And then when you use that spot just for weekly value, who am I getting for this week to win me this category, to get me these extra games for the week? Wayne Ellington went back to nothing with Tyler Johnson returning 4 points in 18 minutes for the Duke. Let's move on to the next game now. We'll talk Detroit and Boston. Andre Drummond really eviscerated the Celtics front court. They ended up losing the game, but Drummond had 28 and 22. He had 2 steals and 2 blocks. He actually shot 57% from the line and was 63% from the field. He has been up and down this season, but he's always got the ability to turn in a monster, and that's exactly what he did here. Ish Smith outplayed Reggie Jackson in this game, but Stan Van Gundy did go to Jackson down the stretch, probably ended up costing the Pistons the game, so I don't think we need to be worried about Jackson's role. Reggie had 12, 2 and 6 in 28 minutes, while Ish had 12, 3 and 2 with 2 blocks. Ish also was 6 of 7 from the field, which will never happen again in his life. The fishing rod, the tackle box, John Lua, 6 and 6 in 26 minutes with 2 blocks and 3 assists for Lua. He's a very tenuous 12-team league hold, I believe, while Kentavious Caldwell-Pope bounced back with a nice 18-point line. Granted, it came on 16 shots, but 18 points, 3 assists, and 2 steals is a decent performance. Marcus Morris, this is Marcus Morris at his best, 13 points in 35 minutes and not much else. Beno Udrih played 8 seconds, so that's great news for all the Beno fans. Let's talk Celtics. Al Horford played 13, 6 and 6 with 2 blocks, a very nice Horford game, and Jay Crowder is crushing it at the moment. Another 4 triples for Jay. He's hit over 33s in his last 10 games. 21 and 8 with a steal. He was a guy that I was relatively critical of maybe 6 weeks ago, saying that I thought he wasn't quite living up to where he'd been, but all of a sudden he is just hitting threes at a phenomenal rate, hitting them fantastically and really helping your team. Kelly Olynyk went back to 20 minutes, 5 and 4. Jonas Jerebko had 24 minutes, he had 3 and 10. And Amir Johnson had 4 and 5 in his 15 minutes. So the passing out of minutes in the front court is back to a complete lottery. Isaiah Thomas. 24 points in the fourth quarter for Isaiah, 41 in total, 4 triples, 8 assists, 2 steals, horrendous defense, but 15 of 15 from the line is brilliant. He was 11 of 23 from the field, fantastic. He just continues to do shit that's impossible. And someone tweeted to me today, the best part of your podcast is when you admit that you're wrong about Isaiah Thomas, which gave me a good laugh. And I have been wrong, because I have said that this won't continue. We'll check how it goes by April. We'll check how it goes by March. But for now, I've been wrong. And when I look at things that I get wrong, I will look at them and go, well, why did I get it wrong? Was it something that I completely missed? Or is it something batshit insane that a 5'7" man is doing something that nobody in the history of the NBA has ever done? And I expected that to not continue. Well, that's exactly what is happening. So I think that my methodology was fine in that scenario. He's just continuing to make me look like an idiot, and a lot of people look stupid with stuff that is almost out of the realm of physical possibility for a man of his stature to hit as many shots that he does on as many shots that he takes just to be this efficient is pretty crazy. Hats off to you, Isaiah. I did have him as my all-star starter, so people think that I'm anti-Isaiah Thomas or I don't give him respect. I had him as my all-star starter. I had him and Kyle Lowry as the two starters, so I think that he's been good. It's more that I try to provide a secondary point of view or an opposing point of view to the potential circle jerks that go around on internet areas talking about this guy being an MVP or being the best, or then I say, well, let's look at the common sense associated with it. Let's look at why it might not happen or why I think it won't happen or won't continue to happen. And sometimes you get it wrong. Again, by the end of March, then I will concede that I'm fully wrong. But for now, this last 6 weeks, 2 months maybe, Isaiah Thomas has clearly proven me incorrect by the just the notion that he's been able to do this stuff that's pretty much impossible. So congratulations. Jaylen Brown started, wasn't great for Jaylen, 4 and 3 in 18 minutes. I think it's going to be a very big stretch to say that he is going to have any standard league value at all this season. A couple of nice games, but it just doesn't happen consistently enough, and obviously he goes back to being a nothing when Avery Bradley returns. Or not, he's pretty much a nothing as it is anyway. Orlando and Minnesota, this game went to overtime. The Timberwolves got the victory. As I said, Evan Fournier returned, but he came off the bench and CJ Watson started. And it was a good game from Watson. 18 and 4 with 2 assists and 2 steals. Easily his best game of the season. I don't think it's enough for Frank. Well, actually, you know what? It is Frank Vogel, so maybe it is. I was going to say I don't think it's enough for him to remain starting while Fournier comes off the bench. But Vogel does some dumb shit, hence Nikola Vucevic was benched for stretches of the season. Hence, Lord Alfred Payton was benched for stretches of the season. So let's monitor the situation here and look at Watson, but consider him a deeper league guy. Serge Ibaka has been drifting, but a 17 and 10 line with 2 blocks and 3 triples is nice. He is that guy that at times for the year was putting up top 20 numbers. I didn't think that would stick, and it hasn't. He's down to like a top 50, top 70 type of player. Lord Alfred Payton had 21 with 3 steals, while Jeff Green,
My name is Jeff.
10 points with 4 assists for Jeff, a nice deep league ad who's in a consistent sort of run of form. Aaron Gordon, that's just nothing from Aaron Gordon. 12 and 6 in 28 minutes. In a 10-team league, I don't think that there's much point in holding Azza. In a 12-teamer, I talked about this the other day. Really depends on where you're sitting, but I wouldn't be married to him. Nick Vucevic, 13, 11, and 5 in 38 minutes. For Vuce, wasn't a great efficient night, but he played the 38, while Bismack Biyombo, man, that guy, he is absolutely... Is he a worse offensive player, or is Andre Robertson worse? I don't know which one's a worse player offensively. Does great stuff defensively, but man, he's bad. 6 rebounds, no other stats for Bismack. For the Wolves, how's Rick Rubio going? 6 triples for Rick. 22, ravishing Rick Rubio. Robbinsdale, Minnesota. He hit 6 triples, Rick. He had 22 points. He had 8 rebounds. He had 8 assists. He had 2 blocks. Ricky Rubio is now shooting, now hold on to your pants, 41% in the last month. And you'll probably say that, Josh, come on, man. 41%? That's shit. It is, but this is a guy that's a 38% shooter, a 37% shooter. So you get stretches of games where you're hitting 41%. It boosts your scoring up, and then he is just this solid, in a punt field goal build, he's like a top 30 guy, but he's a solid top 50, top 40 type of player. He's averaging basically 10 assists a game over that last month. He's a good rebounder. He's getting steals, and that little run at the start of the season where he was struggling is firmly in the rearview mirror. Wigo had some really good clutch performances here. 27 points in 41 minutes for Wigo, 3 rebounds, 5 assists, 2 steals, and a block, and these are the sort of games that we know he can do. He's got the potential to. He doesn't do them often enough, and he doesn't seem as locked in enough. But this is why we say Wiggins can be a top 50 player. I don't have confidence that he will consistently do it, but he can do it, and that's always a good thing to see. Nemanja Bjelica played a lot down the stretch here over Gorgie Jeng. 24 minutes for Bjelica, 7 points with 2 blocks, while Jeng had just the 5, but added 14 rebounds. Thibodeau will do this occasionally, but it doesn't mean too much for Jeng's value. Shabazz Muhammad chipped in with 10 off the bench, while Zaki Levine had not a good night. Only shot the ball 9 times, which when he shoots at 9 and Rick Rubio shoots at 16, there's something not quite right there. 11 points with 3 boards for Zach in 43 minutes. Still a decent buy-low opportunity, I reckon, for Zach Levine. Let's talk Cleveland and Dallas. The Cavs on the road. A horrible, horrible loss. There was no Kevin Love, who was also going to be out for Wednesday. So the Cavs started Richard Jefferson, who played 25 minutes, Dickie Jeff, and had 11 points with 3 triples and a block. That's like 16-team zone just for that one game. While Channing Frye had 13 and 7 with 3 triples in 2 blocks in 19 minutes. I think they should have played Frye more than that. That is the common sense maneuver to me, but it wasn't to be. Frye can also be used in that Wednesday situation, even as a 12-team guy, just to add some threes to your roster. LeBron just missed the triple-double, 23, 9, and 9 with 2 steals in 37 minutes, and LeBron and the Cavs had a losing record in the entire month of January, which is just ridiculous to really think about that. Kyrie had 18, 5, and 5. Wasn't a very efficient night from Kyrie, and this was a game that Geordie McRae played 30 minutes. Yes, Geordie McRae played 30 minutes. Also, if anyone listening to this podcast is still holding on to Kyle Korver in 12-team leagues, just don't. He took 2 shots in 26 minutes. He had 4 points. He hasn't been a 12-team league player all season, and he's gotten worse since coming to Cleveland. It's just not happening. Tristan Thompson, Jesus. The last game that he played, he had 4 steals, 4 blocks, 19 points, 12 rebounds. It was set up for him. He's in form. He's playing against the Mavs, who will get without Andrew Bogut. There's no Kevin Love. So that was great. Tristan Thompson had 8 boards. He didn't take a single shot in this game. He had 0 points, 8 rebounds, no assists, no steals, no blocks for what was a horrific line. And as I've talked about him plenty of times, it's fine to own if you just want field goal percentage and rebounds, because that's all he's offering you. He is not a must-own player, but he can be. Iman Shumpert's shooting dropped back down, 1 of 6 for 8 points. He had been giving a lot of threes and a lot of steals. That didn't happen in this game, but if you picked him up, I wouldn't have an issue with keep holding him. What about Yogi Ferrell? For the Dallas Mavericks, 2 straight starts for Yogi, 35 plus in each game. In fact, he played 38 here against the Cavs and went for 19, 5, and 3. He shot 7 of 15 from the field. He hit 3 triples. He had 4 steals, and that's a huge performance. A couple of things we need to know about Yogi Ferrell. He's on a 10-day contract. He will get a second 10-day contract, guaranteed to me. He's definitely getting that. This is a team playing without Darren Williams. It's a team playing without JJ Barea. Now, Barea is not going to be back until after the All-Star game. Williams, we don't know exactly, but he should be back, I would guess, by the weekend. Once Darren is back, Ferrell's value goes. But for now, it's a great ad. Get maybe 1 or 2 games out of you. Check the schedule and check if you add him. Check whether it actually fits on your roster, because that wouldn't make sense if it didn't. But we're going to see him around for another 10-dayer, and they might sign him for the rest of the season. But remember, there are 2 point guards to come back for this team, Barea and Williams. So you might get 2 games out of Yogi. If you're in a 16-team league, you might get 2 weeks out of Yogi. Don't go crazy. Go to your waiver wire. Is Yogi gone? Okay, he's gone. Who got dropped? A lot of the time, again, people can get excited because they love points. He had 19 points against the Cavs. Whoa, let's go grab Yogi. And they make a dumb move. I'm not saying it's a dumb move to add Yogi, but grabbing Yogi to drop, say, someone like Evan Fournier would be a dumb move. Dropping someone like James Johnson, which you would never do in this situation, but that would be a dumb move. But if you've got someone that's much worse than that, drop him, grab him. See how it goes, see how it fits your squad. But just remember those couple of things. Dwight Powell stepped up. He had 29 minutes, 14 and 8 with 2 steals and 2 blocks. Great numbers. I like Dwight Powell. Rick Carlisle doesn't apparently share the same conviction that I do, and that's why his minutes are seemingly all over the place. Big performance in big minutes. The problem is, how often does he get these big minutes? When Bogut was out last time with the hamstring issue, Powell was a sneaky top 100 guy based on very, very high percentages and some very sneaky defensive numbers. Well, he started at it again here with 55 and 100 as from the field and from the line, and 2 steals and 2 blocks. If those things you need, if you need defensive stats without hurting your free throws, yeah, Powell would be worth a look. But I wouldn't be getting too overly excited because he could just as easily play 17 minutes in the next game. The Pencil had 24 and 11 in 37 minutes, while Dirk had 8 and 6 in his 24, and Wes Matthews dropped 21. Seth Curry was inefficient, 16 points on 17 shots, but still getting some nice numbers. He is putting up really good numbers, really solid numbers, without being overly flashy and exciting, but he's got to roll until these other players return, while Dorian Finney-Smith only saw the 13 minutes of action. The last game of the night, the Memphis Grizzlies against the Phoenix Suns, the smackdown from the Grizzlies. I just want to give a quick shout out to David Fizdale for winning this game by 20 points and for playing Mike Conley 33 minutes, which cost me first place in the GPP on Draft Stars today because the person who came up behind me and beat me had Conley, who went off for about 65 points. So shout out to Fizdale, shout out to Conley staying in the game way longer than necessary in order to try and get 40 points and end up screwing me over in the process. I'm kidding, of course, because he gives nothing. He doesn't give any consequence whatsoever to what happens to me. But I would have liked for him to just shut it when they were 20 points up halfway through the third quarter. You know, Mick, just take a seat, mate. Just sit back on your 27 minutes and give that person who came in behind me just an honourable runner-up prize. Still came second, so that wasn't too bad for me in that GPP, but would have really enjoyed taking home first place. As for Conley, he was fantastic. 38, 6 and 9, 7 triples, 2 steals. He is really a really, really good player. Also, I wish I could remember. Who was the player? There was a player a few weeks ago that said that right now, they would take Derrick Rose on their team over Mike Conley. Shout out to whoever you were, player. Because you are not watching much NBA. Marc Gasol was great, 18, 6 and 3 with 2 blocks and 2 triples, and Zebo chimed in 18 points in his 23 minutes. Zebo's pulling down a lot of boards at the moment and he's scoring well, but in true Zebo fashion, he's not doing much else and the minutes fluctuate somewhat. Jermichael Green is not a 12-teamer. Move on from him. And Chandler Parsons, he looked terrible in this game. Like really, really struggled. He looked like he was in real bother with his knee. I wouldn't be bothered with him. Unless you're in a dynasty format, I don't think there's any point in dealing with Chandler Parsons at this moment. Yeah, look, you get to March, he could easily be a top 50 guy, but my hope for him actually being able to play full minutes by March is dwindling very quickly. The way that I saw the trainers working on his knees on the bench today, I just went, oh shit, this is not looking good for Chandler. And I think they're just going to continue to play him low to mid 20s a game for basically the remainder of the fantasy season. And that's not going to work out. Tony Douglas was back for this team. He played 5 minutes and went scoreless. And Brandon Wright, remember that guy? Brandon Wright's back, the permanent monster. Played 5 minutes, had 6 points and 2 rebounds. He's a long way off coming anywhere close to 12, 14, 16, 18 team league value. But he was a guy that if he played 25 minutes, he would always look great in the rankings. And that's because he'd put up 0.1 turnovers in that time, and you know how I feel about turnovers, and that inflated his ranking up to about 120 instead of like 190. So he always had the biggest jump between 8 and 9 cat rankings, and he was always a permanent monster as well, but never really was able to ever turn it into anything more. But he's a guy to watch in your very deep leagues at least. For the Suns, I don't know if this is a turning of the corner. I don't know if it's a change in attitude from Earl Watson, but Marquise Chris played 34 minutes. Now, a lot of the time, Chris is unable to play 34 minutes because he gets 5 fouls in 5 minutes. But some other times, it's just because of stupidity as a coach, of Earl Watson just saying, no, let's just limit him to 20. That'll do. Chris was great, 20 and 6 with 2 triples, 2 steals and a block. He's still horrible out in the court. Like, he's still not a good NBA player. He's horrific defensively. He makes terrible decisions at times. But for a fantasy point of view, he's a 1-1 waiting to happen. He's a 15, 14, and 9 sort of player with a 1-1 in decent minutes. And that, of course, is going to have value. Can you trust Earl Watson to do it? You can't trust Earl Watson to do really anything at this point that resembles good coaching. But this is a step in the right direction. So you've got your streaming spot. Have a look at Chris. Grab him. Don't have huge hopes that this is something that will continue. but it is a step in the right direction. PJ Tucker got himself ejected, but not before playing 25 minutes and scoring 11 points, while TJ Warren had 6 and 5 with a steal and a block in 21 minutes. The use of TJ Warren is one of the most baffling things in the NBA at the moment. I am pretty convinced it is tied to Eric Bledsoe, and understand completely if you want to move on. 22 minutes for Tyson Chandler, 2 and 4 with 2 blocks. Disappointing performance there, while Alex Len got the minutes, which is a positive. 6 and 7 with a steal and a block for Len. Devin Booker, another 20-point performance. 39 minutes for Devin, 22 and 6. The guy is scoring at a huge rate. Took him 20 shots to get there today, so sort of putting a dent in the efficiency strides that he's taken so far this month, but the scoring has been great for him. He obviously has his limitations as a fantasy player, but he can become a top 50, a top 40 guy at some point in his career. Also great that he went 10 of 12 from the free throw line. Eric Bledsoe struggled with his shot. He was just a poor 3 of 11 from the field, 14, 5 and 4, but added a pair of blocks, while Brandon Knight was terrible. 4 points in 16 minutes, and I just don't... People might be looking to stash him in hopes of a trade. I don't think he's good enough to get onto a team and play 30 minutes and start recapturing that form that we saw for half a season in Milwaukee. That seems like the biggest half-season outlier in recent memories, because he's been terrible before that, good for half a year, terrible after that, terrible after that, terrible after that. That's sort of where we're sitting with Brandon Knight. Also, shout out to Earl Watson, who said in his pre-match press conference that he was going up against the Twin Towers of Memphis. He wanted to really get and see how Chris and Bender looked out there, and then the Suns ruled Bender out and wasn't playing with an injury. So shout out to Earl for his misinformation. All right, that is all the games done from Monday. I'm going to take a quick break, and then we're going to be back and we're going to preview all the action for Tuesday. Ladies and gents, we are back. We're going to talk perfect DFS lineups, starting with FanDuel. Isaiah Thomas had 54 and Mick Conley had 60.7. At shooting guard, Dion Waiters had 40.7 and CJ Watson had 28.8. Small forward, Bob Cove, 45. The Pencil, 40.7. Power forward, James Johnson, 36.3. Serge Ibaka, 36. And Andre Drummond, 65.9 for a total of 407.1, and that cost 59,700. On DraftKings, Isaiah Thomas, 57.5. Dion Waiters, 43. The Pencil, 44.25. Serge Ibaka, 40.5. Drummond at 69. Yogi Ferrell at 38.25. Marquise Chris at 33. Mick Conley at 65.5 for a total of 391, and that cost $50,000. Now, what? I didn't plan for this, so I'm going to try and look it up now. I don't know if you guys are interested in this at all, but I'm going to tell you my GPP lineup today that almost took down the tournament over on DraftStars. Hopefully, I can easily just bring that up here and tell you the team that scored. Where is it? Let's see. All right, let's have a look at this team. It scored 375.5 over on DraftStars. This is the team that I put in today. Now, whenever I enter GPPs, I only ever do single entry. I don't do multiple GPP lineups. So I put one entry in today. This is the lineup that I had: Isaiah Thomas and TJ McConnell as my point guards, Seth Curry and Shabazz Muhammad as the shooting guards. My small forwards were Bob Cove and Jimmy Johnson. At power forward, Channing Frye and DeMarcus Cousins. And at center, Karl Anthony Towns. And that gave me 375.5. And the winner had 381. So who was the winner? I'll give him a shout out here. JK 2016. So shout out to JK 2016 for knocking me off right at the very end of that tournament. I don't know if you guys found that interesting or not, but I thought I'd let you know what the lineup I had was in today's DraftStar tournament. The first game of Tuesday is the New York Knicks and the Washington Wizards. The Wizards are favored by 8, and the total is 216 points in this one. There's no questionable players that we need to pay attention to prior to tip-off for this game, so that's always great. The problem is that all the questionable guys are in the late game, so there's going to be some risks having to be taken. And in GPPs, going with some of these players who might be listed as questionable means they're going to have low ownership. It can blow up in your face and screw your lineups, but if you're going multiple lineups, taking that risk might work out. So players that we don't know their status of, Nick Jokic, who's been upgraded to doubtful, D'Angelo Russell, who's questionable, Manny Mudiay, who's questionable. Those sort of Cody Zeller, who's doubtful, probably not as big a impact guy, but Jokic is going to be the big one. I doubt he plays, hence the doubtful tag. But if he plays, that's going to be a huge boost in tournaments if you happen to take that risk. But it goes without saying that it is a risk. Let's look at the point guards. There is no Derrick Rose here, so Brando Jennings is going to get another start. He is at 5,600 on FanDuel. That's a $1,000 price rise. And that's probably taking away a fair bit of the intrigue with Brandon Jennings. He is at 5,100 on DraftKings as well. Look, he had a nice game in the last one. Put up 43 points in that 4 overtime game, which we have to remember, it was a 4 overtime game, and he played 53 minutes. But at 5,100 over on DraftKings, I think that's fine. 56 on FanDuel, maybe. I still think that there's some value in that, but he's not going to be a must-play guy. John Wall, on the other hand, now gets to face off against Brandon Jennings. He's at 10,500. We're talking about a 6-game slate here, so Wall doesn't stand out as being a brilliant option. He's at 10,000 on DraftKings as well. But given that it's a small slate, you need to find some ways to spend that money. And Johnny Wall is going to be a player who can do that. I think he's a decent option on FanDuel. Again, not quite as in love on DraftKings, but it's a great matchup situation for him taking on the Knicks. And if he gets to 50 points, you should end up being pretty happy. Now, he is averaging 45.5 over the last 3, so it's a little bit of a step up, but he's coming off a 51-point game, so he can do it. Shooting guards, Brad Beal, $7,000 for Bealey. A good matchup for him as well, taking on the Knicks. He's priced a little bit higher. Well, that's not true. He's priced 6,800 on DraftKings, but it's a little bit higher in terms of relative to salary cap over on DraftKings. So I'm not as much of a fan of him over there, but over on FanDuel at $7,000, again, on a limited slate, not a bad play at all. In fact, I think he's quite a solid play. He's a guy that's averaging 33 over the last 5. He's averaging 33 over the last 3. Really decent consistency from him coming as well, and he's been an impressive player this season. For the Knicks, Justin Holiday is a punt option. He played some big minutes in the last game. He can always turn it on if he gets the minutes. Relying on Hornacek to do that is impossible, but that's why he's a GPP type of guy, while Courtney Lee has been crushing it. Consequently, his salary is now up to 4,800, and I don't have a huge amount of confidence in Courtney Lee at 4,800, 43 on DraftKings, but say on DraftKings, he's averaging 36 points the last 3 games, which is great at 4,300. On FanDuel, he's averaging 34 points, which is great at 4,800. Do you go and add or use Courtney Lee? It is a significantly negative matchup. Lee is playing well above himself at the moment. I don't think that it's a one that I'm going to be fully invested in. I'll say it that way. Kelly Oubre at 3,600 for a small forward, probably not. Melo is playing fantastically, but subsequently he's at 8,500 now on FanDuel, which is obviously a fair chunk of your salary cap gone there with Melo. At 7,500 on DraftKings, love it. He's averaging 45 over the last 5. No reason to think that he really slows down too much here. And no problem with using Melo. I think he's probably more a GPP guy on FanDuel, but on DraftKings, no issue using him in either format. Otto Porter. Love Otto Porter for what he's been doing, but it doesn't translate brilliantly into DFS stuff. He's averaging on FanDuel in the last 3 games just under 28 points a game, but at 6,600, that's not enough. It needs to be higher quite clearly. He's at 64 on DraftKings and just barely averaging over the 30 points. The matchup for him is a decent one. It's actually, that's not true. It's almost about neutral. So I don't really fall in love with it in a huge amount. He just doesn't see the ball enough, which is a real problem. Mindaugas Kuzminskas, he had a good game, but it was quadruple overtime. At power forward, Kristaps. He's at 6,500 on FanDuel. He's at 6,200 on DraftKings. The numbers are falling. The output is falling. But I love him as a GPP option. We know what Kristaps can do. We've seen him do it multiple times. It just isn't happening at the moment, but it could easily change. So that's why I like him as a tournament guy. Jason Smith is a minimum salary player. He gets a really good matchup. The minutes have started to fall a little bit for Smitty, so I probably look at him in a different or go in a different direction to him. While Markieff Morris is crushing it, but they've crushed his salary in the upward direction. 6,900 on FanDuel and 66 on DraftKings sort of puts any value out of there. Love the matchup for him though, and it would feel all right in a tournament, but it just feels like he's probably been priced a little bit too high to make him a core part of the lineup. At centre, Marcin Gortat is at 6,500. Same with him. That price has just gone up a little bit too high, so I'm not really feeling it. He's at 58 on DraftKings, which is much better, and that is one I can get behind within a positive matchup at a good salary. He is definitely a usable player on DraftKings. The backups, the centres for the Knicks, not the backups, the centres. Bill Hernangomez, Joakim Noah, Kyle O'Quinn. Who knows, man? Who knows? Noah is at 4,500. O'Quinn's at 41. Bill's at 43. Any of them can drop 30. All of them can drop 5. They are GPP only guys. If I'm throwing my hat in the ring onto one guy, it's going to be Billy, but the matchup's a stinker, and there is absolutely no way that you can rely upon these players in cash games because we do not know what they'll play. It changes seemingly on a whim. It changes seemingly based on a random number generator that Hornacek might or might not have in his pocket, although I would doubt that he would have any idea how to use that function on an Excel spreadsheet. Maybe I'm being a little bit harsh. Let's move on to the next game. We're talking about the New Orleans Pelicans. They're taking on the Toronto Raptors. The Raptors are favored by 7.5, and the total is 215 points. No injuries to concern ourselves with in this one, thankfully. Let's talk point guards. I think there's quite a bit of value that we can get out of this game here. It's a decent size spread. It's not the best on the board. There are two others that are higher, but it's decent. It's a nice total, but there is a little bit of value sneaking in with some of these players. Let's talk point guards. Kyle Lowry is at 8,700. You don't want to spend 10 plus on Johnny Wall, then Lowry is going to be your guy. He's averaging 48 over the last 3, had 49 in the last game with DeMar DeRozan back. It's against the Pelicans. It's not looking like it's going to be a tough matchup for him. But the Raptors aren't playing well enough for us to say this is definitely going to be a blowout. They're going to need all the Kyle Lowry they can get. So I like it. 7,800 for Drew Holiday. Man, the guy's crushing it, but shit, that is a lot. It's a lot. Actually, back to Kyle, 86 on DraftKings. Fine. That price for Drew Holiday, man, that is just, that's outrageously high. 7,700 on DraftKings. He's averaging 48. So, you know what? His production is actually equaling that salary. But I don't have full confidence in a matchup against Lowry that he is going to be able to get me 40 points. And that's basically what we're needing him to get in that scenario. Absolutely worth a GPP look because he can go big. He can go for 50 plus, which would work out at a sub 8,000 salary. Work out well. But I don't have full confidence in it. But he remains one of my better GPP type of players. No other point guards worth talking about. DeMar DeRozan is at 8,900 on FanDuel, which is fine in this sort of a slate. There is some value in that. Get your 40 points. Go. DraftKings at 7,800. That looks like tremendous value to me. Yes, he only had 39 in the last game, but 39 at 7,800 is not far off, and it wasn't a great performance. He's clearly got 50-point upside. The matchup is huge for him. It's a great play on DraftKings. Tyreek is struggling a little bit at the moment. Eats one more. Bud Hield. You couldn't put any faith in those guys at all. There's no way you could. At small forward, speaking of no faith, Damari Carroll is at $4,000. He is struggling. I think that's a fair thing to say. Now, the matchup is beautiful for Carroll. If you want to go low owned on a bloke that could come out there and hit 5 threes and get 18 points with 2 blocks and 2 steals, Carroll can do it. It's probably a 1 in 10 chance, maybe a 1 in 15 chance, but that's the odds you got to play in GPPs. And Carroll can do it. At that salary and sub 4,000 on DraftKings at 3,900, the upside's there. There's no way that I would feel any trust in him in cash whatsoever. Terry Ross, he's a GPP guy as well, but I don't really have much use for him in this sort of a scenario. At power forward, Pat Patterson is starting. He's at 3,900. He had 22 points in the last game. That's nice for Patterson, but his upside is limited and his output is limited. Now on DraftKings, where he's at 3,500, I feel good about him being able to approach 20 points, which at 3,500 would be fine. The upside is minimal, but for cash, it's not bad if you're looking to squeeze some other big-name players in there, like the player that he's going to be his opposite number, and that is Anthony Davis. Davo's at 11,200. He dropped a casual 65 points in the last game. He's at 10,500 on DraftKings, and he had 71 in their scoring system. But putting Anthony Davis into cash is almost a recipe for a stomach ulcer. He's been fine the last 2 games and crushed it. But you're looking for, in cash, you're looking for minimizing my variables, making this safe and productive. Not, if this happens, I'm not fully into Davis as this guy that just can't stay high. You know that I defend him quite a bit. But my issue with him now is he's still got this thigh bruise. And a knock in the wrong spot sends him off for 10 minutes, sends him off for the last quarter. And that's why I look at him more as a GPP guy. A bloody good GPP guy, don't get me wrong. But one that I find it hard to trust in cash games. Just at the moment with Big Tone Davis. Donatas Montiunas had a decent game in the last game. He's at 3,700, but I'm going to want to see more from Gentry in terms of relying upon him. And 5,600 for Terrence Jones, possibly the worst value play on the entire board. At centre, Jonas Valanciunas is at 5,800, has been putting up some good numbers at 5,800. I'm okay with it. I think it's a good matchup for him. Davis is going to destroy anyone who's out there, so I don't think that Bebe is going to really fare too much better. I don't think Patrick Patterson's going to fare too much better. If Valanciunas has issues when he gets lost in space on pick and pop scenarios, and that's not really going to be Davis's forte, there is still risk associated with Jonas because of the way Dwayne Casey uses him, but he has been getting a little bit more faith. He's averaging 28 minutes over the last 5 and 29 points, which at 5,800 is absolutely where it needs to go. And the matchup, for as good of defensive stats that Davis puts up, he hasn't been good defensively this year, and he's allowing a lot of fantasy points against him. And if Valanciunas gets that opportunity, he can put up the numbers. So be interested to see what he can do. I think he's a decent play on both sides. Bebe is at 3,900 on FanDuel, and he's at 38 on DraftKings. The upside is there, but he was severely limited in the last game. But I do like his GPP upside in this scenario. Anyone interested in playing Omar Ashik? I'm going to go ahead and answer for you because I can't hear you, and I'll say that you all answered with a resounding no. Let's look at the next game now. We're going to talk Sacramento and Houston. Sacramento, the only team with a back-to-back on this slate. The Rockets are favored by a whopping 11.5 points, and the total is huge. It's 226 points here. The Rockets are struggling a little bit at the moment, so it's not an automatic blowout scenario. It doesn't mean that you can avoid all these, or you should avoid all these players. Let's talk point guards. Pat Bev is at 5,300. Hasn't really been getting anywhere close to that value recently. Now, the opportunity is there for him. He has done very well against Sacramento in the past, so I don't think that it would be a terrible idea to use Pat Bev. I just wouldn't be feeling hugely confident in doing it. At 5,100 on DraftKings, I feel a bit better about him over there just because so much of his value can come from threes, and we know that we get the bonus points over there. The Sacramento point guards, who knows, man? Who knows what's going to happen? Dazza Collison's at 5,100. And he was a stinker today. But he'd been very solid before that. The matchup for him going up against Patrick Beverley is a concern. But I still think there aren't many mid-price point guards that I feel very confident about. So Collison would be one to look at. And even today, look, he had 12 points. It wasn't a great night, but he's been more consistent than that recently. But it is tough. Ty Lawson at 4,600. He played all right today, but 4,600 for a guy that in general is going to play sub 25 minutes is not ideal. Now, when you look at Ty Lawson on DraftKings and at $4,000, that becomes a little bit more appealing over there. At shooting guard, Eric Gordon's at 5,700. The price hasn't come down, even though the form has been pretty ordinary for the last little bit, averaging just 23 over the last 5. You can leave Eric Gordon alone in most cases, I think. While Garrett Temple at 4,200, he was just this nice, solid, let's get me 20 points, consistent player that has dropped off considerably. I wouldn't be caring about him too much. Well, Jim Harden is priced at 12,500. As often, that's on FanDuel. DraftKings is at 12,200. As often happens on short slates like this, it might not look like the best value proposition, but you're going to have cash left over in a lot of cases, and using Jim might be the way to go. He did have almost a 100-point game the other day. We remember that. He followed it up with about 36, so it wasn't an ideal follow-up from Jimmy, but we know that he can go massive. If I'm choosing him on one site over the other, it's going to be DraftKings over FanDuel, but he is not a guy that you lock in and use him as a must-play sort of a guy. Aaron Aflalo, he didn't do great today, but the minutes are there, and at 3,600, maybe you consider it. He's got zero upside, but he could be a cash guy. But if I have to say could be cash, it means he probably isn't cash. Let's look at the small forwards. Trev Ariz is at 5,100. He's been giving us nothing lately, averaging just under 18 points in the last 3 games. He is at 5,100 on both sites, and the upside is for him to go for 30 comfortably, especially if he plays some 4 against Sacramento. It is a really good GPP play, I think. Sammy Decker at 4,000 is also a decent GPP guy. It's probably a multi-lineup GPP one. If I'm choosing one optimal lineup, he's not going to be in it, but with a matchup, again, good for him in a situation where maybe Ariza struggles or Ryan Anderson struggles or Corey Brewer is terrible, which is every game. Decker is playing 20-plus minutes over the last few games. He's averaging 26 minutes in his last 5 and giving us 20 points, and he could easily give you 20 again. So Decker is definitely someone that is worth paying attention to and considering in your GPPs. Matty Barnes had a good game today, but that's like a 1 in 5 opportunity for that to happen. Ryan Anderson at 5,000. Love the matchup. He's done very well against Sacramento in the past. Hate the reliability. 5,000, no, not for cash. GPP's loaded up. Get your 35. He could easily do it. He could have 12, but he could have 35, and that is why Ryan Anderson remains a GPP only type of a player. He is also at $5,000 over on DraftKings. Anthony Tolliver, Will Cauley-Stein. Minimum salary for Cauley-Stein. He had 23 points today. Remember, it came on 80% shooting, so probably a little bit unlikely to continue. And he got 20 minutes of playing time. And how he goes matched up against the Rockets could be interesting. Now, he's a very good defender, but he hasn't been as switched on in that area as what he needs to be at times this season. So I'm not saying that Cauley-Stein is an awesome option, but he's definitely in play as a GPP type of a guy. At center, Clint Capella. Well, we know he's going to get 21 minutes, but is that enough for 4,900? I would lean towards no. He's at 47 on DraftKings. And as for the table, Montrezl Harrell and Nene, well, who knows? Who bloody knows what they're going to do on a nightly basis? Well, who plays? Do they alternate DNPs, which is seemingly the way they've been going recently? And if whoever we hear is starting out of Harrell or Nene, or if it's Capella, but even if it's Capella, I'd be a little bit weird. But if we hear that Harrell's starting, I would feel all right about looking at him in the GPP. If we hear Nene starting, I would be okay. But we all have to remember that whoever's starting takes on Boogie Cousins. And a lot of the time, that's not ideal. And if they're getting roasted, which will probably happen, D'Antoni has 2 other options that he can throw in there. So that takes away a lot of reliability from this center position. As for Boog, he's at 11,400 on FanDuel. He's at 11,200 on DraftKings. The dude's averaging 63 DraftKings points across his last 5. 58 across his last 5 on FanDuel. If I'm spending 11,000 plus, it's him, it's not Jim that I'm putting into my lineups. He has been really crushing it and taking on so much of the Rudy Gay mantle since he went down. So good stuff from Boogie Cousins. Let's talk about the next game now. We are looking at the Oklahoma City Thunder. They are taking on the San Antonio Spurs. The Spurs are favoured by 9. The total is 211. John Simmons is listed as questionable with a wrist issue. He's not going to have too much of an impact on DFS, though, I believe. At point guard, Tone Parker is at 4,100. I wouldn't want to trust it, but he can easily have 27 or 28. We've seen him have these weird scoring halves where he puts up 18 points with 5 assists in 21 minutes in a quarter, 2.5 quarters. That's what I'm trying to say. So Tone Parker definitely has some low price point guard upside in a low price point guard market that's not all that robust. So Parker on this 6-game slate, I think you should absolutely consider him, given the way that he's had these random outbursts at times this season. Russ at 12,200, put him up there with Jim, put him up there with Boogie as to these high-priced players. If Russ is a player that I put under Cousins, I put probably equal with Harden as to who I want to take, but this is the Spurs. This is not an easy matchup. Russ is averaging under 59 points on the last 5, and that sounds harsh. He's under 59, Josh? Come on, man, that's a lot. But when you're spending 12,200, you want him to be getting 60 plus. Now, it's not terrible. The matchup worries me a little bit. In fact, it's quite a bad matchup for Russ. He's averaging just 43 the last 3 times he plays the Spurs, and you get 43 at 12,000. That's horrific. But absolutely, he can be considered. We know how good he's been, but his last couple of games just haven't quite been where they need to be. Pat Mills is not someone I'm keen on, and Cam Payne had 23 in the last game. He's a $3,000 player on DraftKings. I want them to play him more. I want them to play him 20 plus minutes a night. Bill Donovan doesn't listen to this podcast often. I'm sure he subscribes and downloads though. So I'm not sure he's going to listen to that. So I have little faith in it happening. But if he gets 22 minutes, he's getting 24 points. I feel pretty good about that. I just don't think he's getting the minutes. So I would consider it in a GPP, but it's not a strong play at all. At shooting guard, Dan Green is actually putting up some consistent numbers, averaging 22.5 over the last 3, but I would restrict him to GPPs only, while Vic Oladipo is now at 6,000. Almost with Oladipo at the moment, you're getting 30 points. His lowest score in the last 5 is 28. His highest is 35. You're getting 30 points from Oladipo, and at $6,000, almost no better way to go about it with cash. Now, they can throw Kawhi on him at times. They can throw Dan Green on him, which is a concern, because they're not throwing Kawhi or Dan Green on Andre Robertson. They're not throwing Tone Parker on these guys either. So it's going to be Kawhi. It's going to be Green, and that's another reason why with Russ you do have to be concerned. But Oladipo is okay to use, but we just have to bear in mind that there is that level of caution that needs to be exercised. At small forward, Andre Robertson, cool. Let's talk about Kawhi. He's at 9,600, which is obviously a lot. Now, he's averaging 45 across the last 5, and at 9,600, it's not quite getting it done. It's okay. The matchup is fine. I would feel all right about using Kawhi, but I would feel much better about using him on DraftKings, where he's at 8,800. On FanDuel, he's all right, but I think you can do better than that. On DraftKings at 8,800, a really solid option, a really good place to go at sub 9,000, get your 45 points. I feel pretty good about Kawhi being able to do that at that somewhat suppressed salary. Jeremy Grant could see some big minutes. He's at 35. He is a GPP only guy. I don't love Jeremy Grant. And at 3,200 on DraftKings, the exact same thing is the case. Domantas Sabonis is also worth a look as a GPP, 3,500 and 3,300 on FD and DK respectively. He's going to have an opportunity with Cantor out. He won't take it most games, but occasionally he will. And at that salary, he doesn't need to do much to return value. The Spurs matchup is not easy. It's not ideal for him, but I don't think that he is in a horrible situation. It's just not ideal. David Lee at 5,700. He's putting up numbers, but that price is right where it needs to be. So there's no value in using Dave Lee, in my opinion maybe. LaMarcus Aldridge at 7,800, getting nowhere near that sort of value at all. Averaging just 32 in the last 3, had 28 in his last game, and has struggled recently against OKC. To me, Aldridge is someone I'm just not going to have any shares in at all. At center, Steve Adams at $6,000, a disgustingly bad matchup against the Spurs, and his numbers recently have not been stellar anyway. Even in that game without Adams, he didn't really take off. At 5,400 on DraftKings, I can almost forgive it, and I think that he's worth using over there. But at 6,000 on FanDuel, he definitely becomes a harder play to use. Joffrey Laverne is a GPP upside guy. We saw him drop 19 in the first game without Cantor, and at minimum salary, he could exceed that number and be a useful option. At 33 on DraftKings, the exact same situation to me. All right, let's talk about the next game now, where we're going to travel to Portland. Us and the Charlotte Hornets are traveling to Portland. The spread is we've got the Blazers favored by 3 points in this one, and the total is 214. Cody Zeller is doubtful, so that means we're going to load up Spencer Hawes, and Jeremy Lamb is probable. That's not going to impact us too much. Let's talk point guards. Dame versus Kemba. 8,300 apiece for both of them on FanDuel. I don't love it at that price. Now, Kemba has been outperforming Lillard considerably, but I think you'd be shocked to know that going up against the Blazers as point guards has actually been a negative recently, and that they're providing somewhat of an issue. So where does it put both of these guys here? I think it almost puts them in the same spot. Lillard's got the better matchup, but the worse form. Kemba's got the better form, but the worse matchup. They take on each other, so not a massive amount of defense is going to be played there. And I would consider them both GPP guys, but comfortably I would put Lillard over Walker in a GPP because he's got the ability to go bigger more regularly. He's also got the ability to bust more as well. But I wouldn't trust either of them in cash game situations. Now, Kemba at 79 on DraftKings is a little bit more appealing. Dame at 87 is far less appealing. So I would be okay with Kemba in cash on DraftKings, and I would definitely prefer him in a tournament because we're talking about almost a $1,000 price difference over there. Shooting guards, Nick Batum is at 7,300, has been putting up some decentish numbers, but not quite to that level. It is a game in his former home arena. If you believe in that as a factor, consider it. I think Batum is not a bad cash guy here that can get you just the 35, 36. I think he can do that. Yeah, he's averaging just 33 over the last 5, but I think in a matchup it's a marginal negative that might be offset by the fact that he's in his former home arena. I think Batum is definitely worth a look. Over on DraftKings, Batum is 7,400, so it's a significantly worse situation. CJ McCollum is at 7,900. I love the matchup for him here. I just do not want to spend 79 on CJ at this point. He's struggling to get to that sort of a level, but on DraftKings at 76, I think that's not a bad play. With the positive matchup, I would definitely consider him a GPP guy, but I don't think it's a great cash scenario. Same as Alan Crabb, the Crabster. He's at 3,600. He's not doing a huge amount, but he can occasionally go off, but yeah, not a lot in it. Evan Turner's at 4,800. I imagine that Turner remains starting. He dropped 32 in the last game against the Warriors, and he's averaging 23 across the last 5. This is a positive matchup, a very good positive matchup for Evan Turner, and I think that he's got the ability to go for 30 plus. Well, we saw it last game, and at 4,800, that makes him a very nice target. He's at 47 on DraftKings. No problem with Evan Turner. I think he does have some tournament upside if that's the direction that you want to go. Michael Kidd-Gilchrist is at 55. That salary sort of prices him out of my price range, given the production that he produces. Production and produces, great use of English. And Mo Harkless really, really battling. You can look at Mo. I reckon you can look at Mo as a GPP guy at 4,000. What if they go back to him and give him 28 and he gets 2 steals, 2 blocks, 10 boards, 15 points, 3 triples? Like, that's not a crazy line for Mo Harkless, but it feels a long way off at the moment, so I won't be looking at that as being a cash play whatsoever. At power forward, Frank the Tank, Marvin Williams. Neither of those guys are really doing it for me, although you play the Blazers and power forwards can get a significant boost. If I'm looking at anyone, it's Marv Williams, but then I look at his price and it's at 5,100 and I go, there's just no upside in that. So that's a no from me. Whereas Al-Farouq Aminu at 5,300 has really been struggling, gets the positive matchup, but I don't feel confident about using him. Now, on the other hand, Aminu on DraftKings at 4,500 is really good, and I think that that's a great GPP play. Marv Williams at 49 is a little bit better, just with that little bit less price and the fact that he benefits from the threes. But still, he's not a good option. He's not a great option. At centre, Spencer Hawes at 4,900 and Mason Plumlee at 74 on FanDuel. Both absolutely worth using. Plumlee is averaging 36 over the last 5. He's playing really well. And Spencer Hawes is averaging 25 in the last 3 games. Sons, Cody Zeller, and at 4,900, I think that's a really solid cash play. Now, they have bumped his salary by $900, which is a pain in the ass. You're not getting that free hit that you've been getting. And on DraftKings is at 46, the same story. But still, there is use in Spencer Hawes in the place of Cody Zeller, who is currently listed as doubtful. Let's wrap things up now with the Denver Nuggets taking on the Los Angeles Lakers. As I said earlier, Nick Jokic is listed as doubtful. Manny Mudiay is questionable, and Ken Fareed is probable. We've also got Wilson Chandler as probable and Jamal Murray as questionable. Now, if Murray and Mudiay is out, it's going to mean a ton of minutes for Jameer Nelson, and Will Barton's going to have to play some point, and Malik Beasley is going to get in there. But it means we want as much Jameer Nelson in that scenario, I believe, as you can realistically fit in. With Jokic unlikely to play and Fareed probably going to play, it's going to mean Nurkic is in play, and it's going to mean that Fareed is a very good option as well. For the Lakers, D'Angelo Russell, Julius Randle's already ruled out with an illness, so that opens things up for Zubats, because Tariq Black will likely start at the 4, and that gives Zubats the ability. And Luke Walton was fairly effusive in his praise for Zubats recently, not as effusive as me, but fairly effusive in his praise, saying there's a chance he's going to start soon. So I've got no problem with owning Zubac in seasonal leagues, by the way. But going and having a look at him in this game with Julius Randle already ruled out, it's definitely a great spot for Ivica. D'Angelo Russell, if he is in, I wouldn't want to use him. I think they'll limit his minutes. If he is out, it means that Lou Williams and Uncle P and Jordy Clarkson become good guys to look at, but be aware that their salaries have been bumped up to compensate for that factor. The Nuggets are favoured by 3.5, and the total is 228. So if you're looking at stacks in this game, this is a game to do it, and there are quite a few options that you can go with in this game. Jordy Clarkson's at 5,100, and he's been putting up some decent numbers recently, but he's only really worth using if D'Angelo Russell happens to be out. And again, I don't think we'll be looking at Russie if he's in. As for Manny Mudiay, love it as a tournament option if he happens to play. I think he'd be very under-owned and he could have a big game. I obviously don't have much faith in that from a cash point of view. And Jameer Nelson is now at 5,100. There is no use in Jameer Nelson unless Mudiay is out. And if Mudiay and Murray are out, we're going to see 37 minutes of Jameer, 38 minutes of Jameer, like a lot of Jameer Nelson. A lot. Uncle P is at 3,900. He has been struggling, but it's a great matchup. I would look at him definitely as a GPP option. Was Gaz Harris is at 5,000. No problems with Gaz, and he actually bumps as well. If, say, guys like Mudiay or Jamal Murray happen to be out, then there is some value in Gaza there. He's at 4,800 on DraftKings also. Really nice. Be a nice part of a nice stack. Lou Williams is up to 6,200, so that takes away so much of his value, and I'm not even sure that his upside really justifies using it. The matchup is brilliant, and yes, he has had a 48-point performance in the last 5, but I would really only consider using Lou if D'Angelo happens to be out. Fighting Will Barton's at 5,000. Well, if we lose a couple of guards, then he is going to be in action. Otherwise, $5,000 is too much to spend on Will Barton. He's at 52 on DraftKings, so the same thing applies for him over there. At small forward, Wilson Chandler's at 5,700, has really struggled recently, averaging just 19 points over the last 5 games, and you can do better than that. I think he's still a GPP guy. I still think there is some value in Wilson, especially with Jokic likely to be sidelined. The Rooster is picking up a lot of the offensive slack with Jokic out. 42 in the last game for Gallinari. He's at 7,000, so it is a fairly significant price hike. At 6,300 for the Rooster on DraftKings, that's fine. I think that is definitely a good option to use Gallinari over on DraftKings without feeling great about him on FanDuel. Brandon Ingram and Luol Deng have combined to average 14 points in the last 3. Sorry, that's not true. In the last game, they combined for 13 points, and they're averaging 19 points over the last 3 games combined. Yes, Ingram could go off, but the faith of Walton has diminished in him recently, and his confidence in himself has also dropped. Now, there is a good opportunity against a Nuggets team that plays zero defense for Ingram to be involved, and he'd be a great GPP stack option in this situation with Randall out, but don't feel good about using him in cash, or I definitely wouldn't. At power forward, it's all about Ken Fareed, but he's at 6,600, so that makes him a little bit of a tougher guy to take a look at. On DraftKings at 5,400, it's fantastic. I think that he can easily beat that with Jokic out and with Nurkic being limited by Nurkicness. Fareed is definitely worth a look. That 66 on FanDuel is probably not right where it needs to be. Let's talk centers. Yusuf Nurkic is at 4,100. I think that the upside here is brilliant. We've seen so many centers cross the Lakers, and Nurkic has got crushability in him. I think that I would go back to the well on him, especially in GPPs. But the Lakers have 2 other good centers as well. Ivica Zubac is at 3,900. Go with him. Absolutely love that. He had 30 points in the last game. The dude's averaging 23 over the last 3 games. At 3,900, he can crush this team. Tariq Black at 3,600. He played 30 minutes in the last game. Yes, it gave you 12 points, but there's upside in Tariq. I would much rather Nurkic, and I'd much rather Zubac than Black, but there's some decent center upside options here. The same story over on DraftKings, except the 5,000 for Nurkic takes away a lot of his upside. Zubac is at 35, and Black is at 3,000. You got to love yourself some Zubac there at that sort of a salary. So there is a lot of value to be had in this matchup between the Nuggets and the Lakers. That rounds things out for today's show. Let's take a look at the picks of the day before we go. Starting off with FanDuel. Tone Parker at 46, Dazza Collison at 51, and Kyle Lowry at 87. At shooting guard, Gaz Harris at 5,000, Braddles Beal at 7,000, and DeMar DeRozan at 89. At small forward, Evan Turner 48, Trev Ariza at 51, and Mallows at 85. At power forward, Ryan Anderson 5,000, Porzingis at 65, and Tony Davis at 11.2. And at center, Nurkic at 41, Valanciunas at 58, and Boogie at 11.4. On DraftKings, Tone Parker 41, Pat Bev 51, and Kyle Lowry 86. At shooting guard, Evan Turner 47, DeMar DeRozan 78, and Jimmy Harden 12.2. At small forward, Sammy Dekker 39, Mallows at 75, and Kawhi's at 88. At power forward, Spencer Hawes 46, Ken Fareed's at 54, and Boogie is 11.2. And at center, Bebe is at 3,800, Jonas Valanciunas at 54, and Anthony Davis at 10,500. Let's look at the Aussies now. Moneyball, Brando Jennings 46, Darren Collison 53, and Johnny Wall 10.3. Shooting guards, Gaz Harris 5,000, Beal at 68, and DeRozan at 92. Small forwards Damari Carroll 41, Evan Turner 51 and Mellows at 87. At power forward, Pat Patterson at 35, Fareed at 52 and Tony Davis at 10-4. And at centre, Yusuf Nurkic, minimum salary 35, Steve Adams 56 and Boogie at 11-6. On draft stars, Jennings at 8.750, Lowry at 14.550, shooting guard Aaron Aflalo 5.950, Evan Turner 8.50 and Jimmy Harden 22.9. Small forward Sammy Decker 5.850, Gaz Harris 9.050 and Mallow at 16.1. At power forward, Spencer Hawes 6.050, Ken Fareed at 83 and Boogie at 20.250. And at centre, Bill Hernan Gomez, obviously a punt, at 57, Mason Plumlee 10.850 and Tony Davis at 19,900. We are done here, guys. Tell your friends about the podcast, and if you like what you hear, give it a review. Subscribe on iTunes. It's the best way to make sure you never miss an episode, and it helps out the show immensely as well. But give it a review. If you've got a spare 5 seconds, it would be really, really fantastic if you could do that for me. Follow me on Twitter at redrock_bball. We are done here, guys. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya. Rick Carlisle.